That's what we're looking for.
I like it.
Johnny.
This is
Johnny.
this is a father of the bride hat for an Indian wedding that my brother Doug gave me. He went to India and he said, "Oh yeah, you need this." I call it my birthday hat. Whenever one of my grandchildren has a birthday, I always wear the hat for the birthday.
You could do Zooms and be the Swami like Johnny Carson.
Oh,
I mean, Steve.
yes.
Yeah.
How about this?
On our age.
People who don't follow directions.
No, we are live, Steve.
It says
just-
here, Riverhaus. Oh, how about that?
Steve, you're setting the right tone for this meeting.
All right.
All
We're
right.
live. So you
You have anybody here?
Vince and Mike are joining. Just a heads up, Harry, we do have a few people listening in. Looks like Brian Drum, Jay Holtz, Jordan Burns, and a call-in listener, just so you know who's, to our knowledge, watching.
Okay, very good. Welcome, everybody.
Good
All right,
morning.
Steve, I'll turn the floor over to you. This is for final review for 180 Cleveland Street.
The final review. I'm puzzled by that because we don't have a lot of information yet. Final review is when all the ducks are in order and we're missing engineering and landscaping and final grading and so forth. And the mystery brown structure that appeared at the last meeting. So I guess I'm puzzled why this is a final review.
Yeah, the applicant did ask for a final review, although their engineering is under review right now. It's not complete. They would wish to proceed with final ABR, and I told them we can submit it, but it's ultimately up to the ABR. So
Just,
Well, I don't know. It's
just
just
the way,
a vote type of thing. This is either you is or you ain't. Final is final.
well, I think maybe the relevant question would be, would there be anything that we're not seeing that would have an impact on the architecture review board opinion of the architecture of those houses? And I guess it's probably what I'd be thinking about would be big changes to grading at around the structures. I mean, as far as the structures themselves are concerned, I mean, certainly we can ask about certain details, but for the structures, it's a complete set. Harry says the grading's under review, and the site work, obviously the retaining walls and those elements are so important. Is there a reason we couldn't vote on this, the architecture of these actually 4 structures that are coming before us, and then with a condition of approval? And obviously we want to, I guess we want to see the retaining wall too, but conditional on approval by us of the retaining wall or other landscape features that are pending.
So George, thank you for that, and Mr. King, I guess I'm a little confused. So after our preliminary approval, we have submitted a complete package for what's required for final review, a complete set of construction documents, complete set of civil engineering. We've even submitted everything for the subdivision plat review. As far as us requesting final review, potentially out of sequence from how you would normally see it, I mean, from our perspective, we last saw you on April 21st, and we have put together every single required component for a final submission. So I guess this is the first time I'm hearing that this would be looked at as either out of sequence or unusual for a final review, because we've submitted everything that's been asked of us for a final review. I do appreciate what George is saying, and certainly I think the focus is the architecture for this group, but as far as what the village requires for final review, we've submitted all of it. you guys have everything and have had it now for some time.
Well, the engineer got your plans about 2 weeks ago, so that's under review. I did submit the plans for building code compliance, and we did get a letter back not approved yesterday. Michael has a copy of that. The preliminary plat was received last week, and it all takes time for this stuff to get reviewed. The ABR can review the aesthetics of the building and put conditions on it, but I'm going to leave that up to them to make that decision.
Okay. And Harry, thank you for clarifying that. Like I said, our understanding of the processes, here are all the items that are required for a final review. We've checked all those boxes and submitted those items. It's as far as the timing of when some of your internal groups have had time to review the associated documents and the timing as it relates to this meeting. I can't really speak to that. I do know that we've submitted a complete package with everything that needs to be in there. And I certainly understand it's a larger project, and some of those things take some time to work through. Harry, we got the response letter yesterday. All looks pretty straightforward. Nothing of any major substance there that can't be, all pretty typical things that very easily addressed. I read through it in detail yesterday. So I would request that we're here for this special meeting, which I thank you all for accommodating. Since we weren't able to be put on the last agenda, I request that this group focus on the architecture and talk through it with us, so we can respond to, we can talk through all of the items that we addressed from our preliminary meeting, and move forward that way.
Harry, can I just ask a question regarding the engineering plans?
Yeah.
Were those focused on the hillside and grading?
Yes. So the engineering plans involve grading, hillside, slope stability, that all those issues are still under review with the civil engineer.
Do we have the visual, I guess, and I probably looked at the site component of this a little more briefly as I ran through these drawings, but do we have a view, elevation view of the retaining wall as something we could look at this point?
More to the point, where is the retaining wall that we're talking about here? Yeah. It looks to me like the buildings fall, the buildings from the site plan that Harry has up here, the topography is dropping, I don't know, 6, 8, maybe 10 feet through the depth of the building. What happens when you get to the lower level of these buildings up against the steeper grade that runs to the river? Is that where the retaining wall is that we're talking about?
I can speak to the retaining wall a little bit. So as far as the information on the retaining wall, we've had on the civil drawings that have been submitted with even our preliminary applications, we've been showing top of wall and bottom of wall elevations as they work across the site all the way back to our preliminary submittals. Okay. We had an elevation because it was asked for of the retaining wall. We had that submitted along with our preliminary approvals. And yes, as part of this submittal, we also have information on the retaining wall included. So this is not in any way the first time that we're seeing this. We know it's an important component, and it's been asked for from very early on, and we've made sure to include that. To help clarify where the retaining wall is in the drawing that Harry has up, it's the heavier line towards the bottom of the sheet, starting over by Cleveland Street. You'll see a round circle with kind of a line through it. If you move down from that, so starting over above that a little bit. No, that's the property line. So if you could, whoever's running the cursor could move up a little bit towards, like, find the word 20-foot building setback. The bottom left-hand corner. There we go. So just up from that, you'll see a black heavy line.
Right.
That's the retaining wall there. So it's for this portion. So it comes down, and then as we work our way back towards the property, it jogs a little bit and continues back.
So this is retaining the hillside above this property.
It is. It is.
And the buildings themselves are designed in a way that that any load that the buildings provide will not add to any kind of stress on the hillside below the building.
That's accurate. That's absolutely right. So the houses themselves are bearing on the rock beneath the hillside. So
Okay.
the buildings are not adding any weight to the toe of the slope. Our geotechnical engineer has been working with Tim Lannon's office to make sure that everything that he would want to see to satisfy the hillside permit in terms of borings is being done. We're actually doing some additional borings tomorrow to do a stability study through one section. We've agreed with his office what he wants to see for the hillside permit. And so we have more borings actually being done tomorrow to satisfy that. But the houses themselves are not adding any weight to the slope. So the retaining wall is just to bench back the area for our driveway. And it, starting in the back corner of the property by where you see unit 6 is at its tallest point there. And I think above grade, Mike, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I think we're showing maybe 6 feet of wall on that side roughly.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're showing
So
at its,
roughly 6 foot at the far end and maybe 2 foot at the Cleveland Street end, sloping up.
yeah, so it's not right. We're gonna be hiding most of what you see now, that current clarifier tank structure that's there, what's not coming out. So the most you're gonna see of this wall from our side, from the driveway, is 6 foot from asphalt to top of wall, and then it tapers down as you work back towards Cleveland Street. We're not actually retaining that much of the hillside since the houses have basements under and we're bringing the grade up around them. It's actually not a real big cut into the hillside.
Right. So as I look at this, and I'm just helping explain this and help everyone understand it. The first couple houses, buildings, the floor levels jump up about 1.5 feet, and then between the building 3, 4, and then 5, and then 6, they step up 1 foot. And so then those lines on the driveway you see are 1 foot increments. So the driveway rises across, the 5 buildings about 6 feet, as you said. So the driveway is gradually sloping up. The buildings are stepping up a little bit, and that probably helps keep the embankment above the driveway there, that retaining wall, down to 6 feet at the top of the site, right?
Yeah, George, thank you for that. Yeah, that's exactly right. When this project was originally looked at, there was discussion that the houses would be much lower than where they're at, and this wall would be much larger. And as the grading developed and we worked this out, we found what we consider to be a good balance between allowing some daylight in those basements and minimizing the amount of exposure on that retaining wall. It was really a balance between those two things to keep the retaining wall to a minimum.
And all the grading is finalized, so it's not like anything's really changing here. You've got some engineering calculations that are still being reviewed. But what's the nature of the retaining wall? What's the surface that you see? What's it look like?
It's shown on our structural drawings currently as poured concrete.
So it's poured concrete, but what's the finish on it?
Just the poured concrete. We can do a smoother brick form on that face.
Okay.
So is there a landscape architect involved on the project or no?
No, there aren't any common parcels that have landscaping on them. And there's very minimal areas for landscaping. Those few beds in front of the houses, and then the Cleveland Street elevation, which is part of Units 1's parcel. Our understanding, and I apologize if this is is if there aren't any for the subdivision approval, if there aren't any common parcels that need landscape, there's no landscape plan required as part of the approval.
Right, and I'm thinking of a landscape architect, not to do pretty stuff, plants and stuff, but a good quality landscape architect is involved in the project from the beginning to help develop the site, develop the retaining wall, develop how the buildings work from the building down to the river and how you develop that, even if it is very natural. I would think, for example, that retaining wall, like a good landscape architect would develop that. Like, what does that look like? And, what's the section cut through there? There should be a section cut, I would think, from the building down to the river, and how that would be developed and how that fenestration would be from a landscape standpoint. They're also typically involved in draining, grading. It's kind of hand in hand, whether it's a project of a single residence all the way up to a project of this complexity.
Right, yeah. As far as the draining and grading, our civil engineers is of course has handled all of that, and we've had to be very careful with that to make sure we're not draining off down over the slope because of the 5-foot setback from the hillside and the requirement that we're not allowed to touch any of the vegetation. Beyond that, there's very little that we can do on the riverside over there. So we do involve landscape architects on our projects when we feel there's a need. And from our perspective, there's just very little area here to require that. Now we'll work with, obviously there's going to be landscaping here, and we'll work with the homeowners and the contractors to do some sort of design build on that. But there's just very little landscaping on the site.
I'm in this situation we have today. I can't flip to the page that has the elevation or maybe the rendering. I don't remember seeing any retaining wall. Excuse me. Like until last meeting, we had a glimpse of a little brown wall that wasn't concrete, I don't think, way down at the end. And now it runs tapering almost to the first unit. What does that look like? I mean, and why haven't I seen it?
Respectfully, Mr. King, you have seen it. We've included very detailed information about this retaining wall because it's been asked for.
It's showing in your renderings, which are very beautiful.
Yep.
We see rain. We talked about the glass and the low glass, and then the trees just below it. And I'm trying to picture a retaining wall.
There's no retaining wall below the buildings.
There's no retaining wall below the buildings at all.
There's nothing on the riverside. We're talking about something that's on the.
You're talking about the uphill side. What is the brown mass in the rendering last time? What is that?
I believe you're referring to what's circled in red right now in the upper left-hand corner. There's a concrete sort of structure originally from the dam works that is being reflected in our renderings that goes down into the river. It's not part of our work. It's an existing structure. It's beyond that 5-foot setback that we're not allowed to touch or do anything with. So we're just trying to represent that the best we can in the renderings. But it's what's on this drawing. It's showing some mechanicals on top of it, which are no longer there. But there is a concrete pad that was part of the paper mill's operations that goes down into the river. That's still on site there. But once again, that's beyond our property line actually, and our the area we're allowed to touch.
And you can go look at it now, Steve. It's there. So it's not going to get any worse, and they're not allowed to make it any better.
Okay. Actually, I was looking for it, and it looked different than it looked in the rendering, so I wasn't thinking I was finding it. Now I know what you're talking. Thank you.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, we do our best with the renderings to represent, what's on site, but landscaping or the current vegetation, for instance, is very hard. Obviously, it's much taller than what's actually shown on our renderings. If you're looking at from the riverside, really the first floor and a half of these buildings are going to be obscured by the vegetation. Now we understand that that's seasonal and will certainly change in the wintertime. But I would just, kind of remind everyone that like what we're seeing in that rendering from as you come up Cleveland Street or from the river is not really the perspective you're ever going to have on these due to the amount of vegetation on the hillside. We're not allowed to touch that. We can't change it. I certainly appreciate that it'll open up in the wintertime and you'll see a little more of our buildings. But the perspective that we're seeing in our renderings, we wanted to not bring the landscape up in front of that, or else you wouldn't even be able to see our buildings, honestly. But that's really, you're never going to see them like that.
Hey, Vince, if I could just make a suggestion that on your site plan here, you remove that water wheel that you have showing and also the cultured stone off that wall, because that's not what it looks like today.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's certainly no problem, Harry. I'm not sure what cultured stone. Where?
On the one elevation, we'll go to it here in a minute.
Sure,
It's
sounds
sticking
good.
out in the, it's a structure that's out in the river by the dam, and it
Okay.
looks like it's got cultured stone attached to it.
Okay. I mean, that stuff's not even on our property line. Yeah, that's. I mean, that's even beyond.
Don't show it on your drawings then.
Right. Right.
Carrie, I also don't know if it's possible to pull up a drawing that shows the entry to the property and shows that retaining wall that Vince is referring to, continuing back across the property, you know, down the driveway across the property. That's an important sight line from Cleveland Street. And if we're going to do a final approval, I want to make sure that we see that rendering, that sight line, before we do an approval.
Yeah.
We do have an elevation, of the wall, if Harry could bring that up.
Yeah, what page is that?
It's a separate page, so, do you have anything beyond site elevation there?
I have everything you submitted to me, so.
Renderings.
Yeah, and that angle, but with the retaining wall.
Yeah,
Right.
you just don't see it. It's
Right. And
that's
it's an
not
important
accurate.
sight line because as you're coming up the street, across the bridge, up the street, your eye goes that direction, and I would just like to see that.
Yeah, I understand that. The view that's, so we have an entry facade rendered from the backside, and from this perspective, you wouldn't see the wall, not only because it's at its shortest elevation there, but we're looking from the hillside, so it'd be obscured by the landscaping. Trying to see, I know we have an elevation. I'm trying to find a sheet number so we can ask Harry to open it up for us.
And potentially you can take over sharing if it's something you have on your computer.
Certainly,
Yeah,
yeah.
you can share. It'd probably be easier if you
We're
guys
having a
did
hard
share.
time bringing up. I'm encouraged by the fact that the wall is
Okay.
between 2 and 6 feet tall. I'm kind of worried about the color of it. And I feel like the color should coordinate with the color of the
That's why I
brick.
think we need to see
minimum.
that too. Right.
I have my, I don't know if I have it open on my screen if someone wants to share mine, or I can, it's in our submittal, it's RH 1 through 6 wall elevation is the document. And it's the elevations at the retaining wall. So whether you want to open it or share it with me.
Christy, can you have them share that screen?
Well, you just have to stop sharing, Christy, and then Vince.
Yeah, Harry, if you stop your screen share, I've allowed all panelists to share from the beginning. So if I'm not mistaken, you have to disable yours so they can enable their own.
How's that? Okay. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. So this sheet was just to help understand the retaining wall elevations. So we can see here, we're looking at the outline of residence. You guys can see my cursor okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the outline of residence 6, the farthest back from Cleveland Street. And you can see here, we're giving top of wall elevations and top of pavement elevations. We can see how, if you're looking through the buildings, how the wall drops down and continues down as it works back towards Cleveland Street and ending about halfway through the first building. And this is where we're looking at, 962 to 959 F, so 2 foot 6 inches at this point here. And that doesn't go all the way up to the street. Now I understand it's not a color rendering, but this is a very detailed elevation so you understand how much this wall you're going to see.
Could you zoom in a little and then scroll?
Certainly.
The diagonal lines seem to go away. There we go. That's better.
Sorry. Yeah.
Great.
So, yeah, so we've, And while I'll kind of scroll through slowly here through as we're talking, and to your point, George, if we with the retaining wall, if we need to talk about putting some color in the concrete or a brick face or something like that on the wall, we can certainly talk through that. I'd like to ideally make sure we at least all understand, where on the site the retaining wall is, how tall it is, really where you're going to see it. So, I mean, from coming up Cleveland Street and from across the river, you're not going to see this wall whatsoever. You only have these little gaps between the buildings, and this will be fully covered by landscaping. There's very few areas from outside the site that you're going to have any kind of perspective on this wall. This is really something that the homeowners are going to be looking at. As I come across here, you can see this is where it gets very short. So, even if you're talking about driving up Cleveland Street, at this point, it's only 2 feet tall, and you're coming at it from an angle coming uphill, and Cleveland Street's at a little higher elevation here. So, of course, I understand the aesthetics of the wall are important, but the reality is it's really something that the residents are going to be seeing. It's not a public facing element. It's just not. You're not going to have a perspective on it from outside the site.
I agree. I think by the time it gets tall, you're between 100 and 200 feet away from Cleveland Street or something like that, I'm guessing. But I mean, that's pretty, it would not be a prominent feature. It's behind the houses.
So it will not be plain concrete.
It's a poured concrete wall, but if we wanted to talk about putting some color in the concrete or a brick form on it or something like that, that's something we could look at. I'd also be okay if I'm not sure the process here. I'm not sure where we're at. I'd certainly like to get into talking about the architecture. If the retaining wall is something that we need a little more information on, and that can somehow be left as an item that we have to, I don't know the process for where we're going to be at with approval on the architecture. If we need to submit some additional information on the materiality of the retaining wall, we'd be happy to do that. I'd hate to get too bogged down on that right now. I'm not sure on what the process is for moving through, because we do have a separate, we have the civil submittal and the plat approval when this shows up on there. So if there's a mechanism where the wall can be reviewed a little further as part of that, I just, I don't understand the process well enough to speak to that, but we'd be certainly happy to provide some more information on that and understand that you need to see some more on the wall itself.
Yeah, Vince, that's one thing I've been trying to stress all along is when you come in for a final review, you should have everything done, all the aesthetics. So the ARB can look at it and say, this is what it's going to look like at the end of the day.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and thank you. And I feel like we've done that. Our intent was to be a poured concrete retaining wall. My comment was I feel like it's done as far as we have a lot of information here on the wall. My comment was if that was an item that they weren't satisfied with and wanted, we'd be happy to provide some additional information. But I don't feel like it's incomplete. I think we have some very detailed information on this wall, an entire sheet dedicated to it, and we've called out the material of it. My comment was just if we need to respond to some feedback from the group here as to some aesthetics on that wall that, the first time we're hearing some detailed feedback on it, we could come back to you with that.
Right. And my only comment is I think it could really coordinate with the color of the brick. And that could be helpful. That's just a comment from me to the board. Bill, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I was going to say that, how does that wall end? What does it look like? I mean, that's part of when you do a presentation of a project, it's not just the architecture, it's the landscaping, it's all one continuous composition. And so that is really important when you drive in. Are you just going to see an end of a wall and it's going to look like unfinished, or it's like stopping in the middle of the building on the other side? Is there a terminus? Is there a pillar? All that stuff's important. Is there a cap on it? Everything should work as one composition. It's not like piecemeal.
I agree with Bill. I think we need to see the plan as a whole. We've been burned in the past when we've looked at things piecemeal. I'm thinking of condos on West Orange Street. Presenting things in pieces, I'm very hesitant about, but this is the first time I've seen this kind of presentation on the retaining wall. I would like to see more.
Ms. Nail, I apologize, but I mean, we're not submitting anything piecemeal. This is a pretty comprehensive submittal that covers everything that's been asked of us. And this is not the first time we've submitted this retaining wall drawing. I apologize if you haven't seen it, but we were asked for this prior to our preliminary review. Harry has, as he said, he's been pointing out for a while that this retaining wall was something everyone needed to see. And we made a point of including elevations for it on our civil drawings that were included at a preliminary stage. We've included this elevation prior. We don't see, and from our perspective, that we're submitting anything piecemeal. There'd be no further drawings that would be developed for this unless we were asked to, to George's point, to look at the coloring of the wall or something like that. But this is a fairly comprehensive submittal for 4 single-family homes. Mr. Childs, to your point, to the end of the wall there, at that point it's 2 feet tall. The grading is going to get it's shown on the grading plan. It's going to get feathered off at that point, and the grading will come up and wrap around that wall, and it's going to cover the edge of the wall. I mean, I think we can all picture what, when you get to that point, what the grading is going to do around that. It's on our grading plan, and we know how that would be graded back. We feel like we've put together, like I said, a comprehensive submittal for 4 single-family houses. I've sat through quite a few of your final meetings and looked at what's been submitted for new single-family homes or extensive additions, and we've done extensive renderings, extensive geotechnical work, civil work, and provided a lot of additional renderings beyond what I've seen on other submittals. We think that we've satisfied all those requirements as far as what needs to be in the submittal and what you would need to see.
You have your views, and you're welcome to your views. We don't know what this wall looks like. It has preliminary approval way back when, and that's all you have. You can't answer Mr. Child's question. You haven't shown us that. You haven't shown us a lot of things. Everything was complete as of April 23rd, and then 2 weeks ago you submitted something to Harry. So you're not as complete as you think, and you need to listen versus explain your way out of this. Your organization is somewhat famous on the west side for kind of having things change on the fly, and that's not going to happen here. We want to know and see everything on paper before you get a final approval. And you can talk for the rest of the morning, but that's the way it's going to be.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I guess my point is not trying to talk around it. I don't, like, on a set of drawings or a submittal like this, every single condition when you're building a home or a site does not have its own necessarily rendering or detail, and things are inferred from the drawings at times. We can't guess when we're putting together a set of drawings to exactly that we need to have, I don't know, a rendering or elevation showing that particular point on the wall. I don't know how to respond to that. We feel like we haven't even started talking about the actual architecture on the 4 houses yet here today. We've been talking about the retaining wall. So if
our village code, I mean, I've brought a lot of projects before Chagrin Falls. Our village code does not require a landscape architect or landscaping plans for residential projects. I mean, there wasn't a requirement for those things. I think that would be nice to see. As Bill says, there are towns where final landscape plans are required. For instance, Moreland Hills. We don't have that here. And I think we should be cognizant of, I mean, we can't say we're disqualifying your application for not submitting something that's not required by our code. So I'm just reminding the board of that.
Gary, do we have purview over retaining walls?
From an aesthetic point of view, yes.
Yes. Okay.
Right. Right, so this retaining wall is not colored, but it's described and the material is clear. So it's, I mean, we don't have, I mean, I'm not saying we should approve this wall necessarily. I'm saying that the submittal of it meets the requirements for a submittal of a wall. And it's up to us to say, hey, it's, you know, as I said, I'm happy it's not taller. And it's way back, it's going way back into this very narrow site. So you're not going to see much of it. I'm not sure I love that if it's just plain concrete. So I think there's some things to talk about there. But I also would be careful that we don't say, oh, the submittal's invalid. It's not. I mean, it's what it's required to be. And it's up to us to ask for more information or for follow-up on it, or for a change in materials or anything else that is important for compatibility of character.
You can always make conditions or ask for additional information on the aesthetics.
Thank you, Harry. And that was my point earlier. Like we included some information about the wall. I'm understanding now that you want to see more, and we're in no way objecting to providing more information. That's what I said earlier. As far as meeting the requirements of the submittal, we've done that. And I understand now that you're wanting a little more detail. And I earlier, just minutes ago, I said we'd be happy to provide some additional information on the wall, especially if that's a condition of a condition separate from the architecture. We're more than willing to do that. And I said that from the outset, once I understood that you want to see a little more on the wall. We have no issue with that. I just don't want to get too bogged down on the retaining wall when we haven't actually talked about the architecture of the houses, which is the primary purpose of sitting in front of you today.
Given the discussion here, I think you can pretty much consider that it will be a condition if you'd like to know the specifics of the wall, and let's move forward.
Absolutely, we'd be happy to provide additional information on the wall. We understand that you're going to need to see more.
And can we get some detailed specifics on what you'd like to see? We provide this elevation, we provide sections, material, I guess.
A concrete wall that whatever very expensive homes are looking at should be more attractive than a plain concrete wall. We'll let you come up with your ideas. We're not going to design it for you. The stone surface was mentioned, color was mentioned.
So you're looking for like colorings, something along those lines.
That would be the minimum, I would say, from the comments I've gotten this morning.
And how the end of the wall transitions. So when you come into the entry, how does that retaining wall look?
Shall we
Okay.
move to the buildings potentially?
Yes. Do you want me to continue sharing some of the renderings,
you
or?
can- Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead, Vince. Why don't you drive the drawings and then.
Okay, let me just scroll through here and find a rendering to start our conversation off of. Okay, here's one here. I'm going to move this to a different screen. I have my notes here. We wanted to make sure that we very clearly went through the meeting minutes from last meeting and addressed every individual item that was asked of us at preliminary. If you would allow me, I can kind of go through this list here directly off of the meeting minutes based on all of your comments. There was a comment, I think Mr. Childs noticed that there was a conflict in a roof ridges not intersecting on the same plane. And that was just something in the drawings getting resolved. I'm trying to think of the best elevation. I think it was right here. Right. This was a comment and that's been resolved. That was just, that the construction drawings hadn't been developed at that point, so that these weren't meeting on the same point. And I think Mr. Childs, you caught that at the last meeting. We addressed that as the construction drawing developed, and that's been fixed. Now this ridge intersects this ridge at the same elevation. The front entry bracket sizes was discussed at the last meeting, and we have lengthened those. I'm trying to see if you have a better perspective here. Please note, so this is the rendering that we looked at before. this is just a rendering. This is what you saw last time, and you can see the bracket terminates about here. And now on our actual construction drawings and our elevations, we've brought them down even further to enlarge them per the comments from the last meeting. So we've made them more substantial as requested.
There's more detail also in the actual CD, the construction documents as well.
Yeah, we have all the details you would expect to see on an architectural item like that bracket are contained within the full construction drawing submittal. I have those, trying to find that page in a, whatever it is, a 50-page set might take me a minute. But if we need to do that as part of today's conversation, I'll open the construction drawings and we can scroll to wherever we need, and you just have to bear with me as I find that element. The other item was we were asked to make these stone lintels above the windows in the garage door more substantial. Originally, they were kind of fine like the sill is shown here, and we've enlarged those as requested above the windows on the garage elevation and also over the garage door here itself. There was some discussion at the last meeting about this horizontal band detail. That is, I think there was some different opinions on that. That is one item that we've elected, we feel strongly about. We want to keep that. We like it. We think it adds to the elevation. So we have maintained that this gray horizontal band across the cedar elevations. There was a additional rake kind of trim board up here. I think again, Mr. Childs, this is one of your comments that you didn't think it was necessary, so we've eliminated that. Let's see. There are some windows. There was a question about a window, and I'm just going right off our meeting minutes, so bear with me, and it's hard to see here. There was a question about this window here need to be a little bit taller to work with to align, I think, with the head height of this sliding door. That's been addressed here as well.
Can I ask if that rendering shows the placement of the buildings accurately? I expect it does, but nothing moved. Like no buildings went back or forward.
No, we have nothing with the footprint or the setback as regards to these buildings has changed since the first time we've been in front of you. That was a part of our zoning approval with Rob, and we have not changed anything. We've maintained our 5-foot setback, and the site plan has not changed.
They look, I only asked because they look tighter, in fact, in the plan drawings than they do in these elevations. I'm still for that window.
Got it. Okay. I'm trying to see what view would show this. Down on our rendering for residence 6, which would be down here. I'm trying to find the right view of that. There was a bracket that was not shown on one of the roof canopies, the entry canopies, and we've added that. I'm just apologizing. I'm trying to find something that might show that. We can open the construction drawings if we need to, but it was one of these on residence. Oh, maybe it was right here. I think this bracket was missing last time we saw you. So that's been added as well. And then it was pointed out that residence 6 on the far end did not have any really very many windows on that elevation. That's on the far back side of the site. So we have added those. That would be over here on this elevation. And I can pull up the construction drawings, but since that is an end unit and it's all the way on the back side of the site, we took that note and we added some windows on that end.
I think it had two corresponding windows. Since the plans flipped, it has 2 of the tall windows as your side elevations of the other.
Yeah, I can, like I said, I'm happy to hear. I have the CDs here. I'm happy to open them. It's just a large set. And it might take me a minute to navigate them. It's opening now.
That's good. There is a couple details that I wanted to take a look at. Certainly.
They're opening now. They're going to be just like, okay, 90 pages. So yeah, sorry. So I can try to find whatever details you'd like to see on the construction set. You just let me know and I'll open to it.
Well, I'm not trying to jump there. I know you're trying to show the end elevation, so let's look at that. That's
Okay, sure. Let me,
A2 something, right?
yeah.
Here we go.
Our elevations. Residence 6. That's the Cleveland Street side.
Here we go.
Yep, yeah. Yeah, so we added these windows were added since the last meeting. There's a fireplace here on this wall, so these will flank that fireplace on either side.
I think those are attractive and effective.
So the list that I just went through were our notes right off of our last meeting in the meeting minutes. Went back and watched the video from the last call, which was very helpful. So we addressed, and I'm sorry, I skipped one. Columns. There was discussion about these columns. We had one column. We've taken this now to, it was requested we go to 2 columns at these corners, which we've done. I think that also shows up in, yeah, here I can zoom in a little bit. And and I can find it, there's detailed dimensions on those columns within the drawings that you would expect to see.
Yeah, A313 and I think A331.
Would you rather me go to the CDs?
I think that's helpful.
Sure. Okay, so there's a section through that porch. I can zoom in, do that. Now you're only, of course, seeing one column here because it's, the other one's behind it.
So this section is one that I was focusing on, and I was not critical of the column itself. I think that's successful. It looks intuitively to me, it's proportionate for a craftsman style column. And then on the exterior side, you're showing a band that's an applied belly band that looks like it is a beam over the column. But in your sections, there's a discrepancy between this and I think a section for building 6. We're just seeing a flat ceiling there that runs out and touches that band. But I think it'd be important to actually raise the ceiling inside that space and actually have at least a 6 or 7 or 8 inch height on the inside. And so that you would actually have a beam over those columns. It's also hard to understand, or I don't think I saw a description of the material of that ceiling, but so right there, if you zoom in on the top of the column, in another drawing, which is a section for building 6, you're actually showing something that's about 6 inches tall.
Okay,
I think that whole ceiling, I think it will still work well with trusses because in your other direction, you're showing the truss as having a little vertical leg on the outside. I think you could pick that up and your trusses would still be a clean triangle and you just have a beam expression which should relate to the width of the column, not just be a thin little thing.
Yeah, I certainly understand the note, and we can look at it, absolutely. I think off the top of my head, you've kind of hit on this with the trusses. I know that truss line is carrying all the way out from inside the building. So if we have a raised heel possibly inside the building, there's something we can do with the heel height to achieve what you're asking. But I think my only concern, and I certainly would ask for your opinion on this as well, is obviously we have a guardrail height we have to meet here.
Right.
And we only have 5 foot clear. My concern would be if we were to add a beam to this and drop this down anymore.
No, I mean raising the ceiling. Exactly. I think that's right. You don't change the column height. You don't change. Basically, you just and you have another sheet further on. It's a section relating to building 6. It probably didn't get caught up, but I don't necessarily want to jump to that. But
okay.
You actually show that ceiling, either the column shorter or the ceiling higher than 8'6".
Okay.
I think if you pop that bearing height just for that area up and use an actual beams along the side and the front of that, you will ultimately be more satisfied with the way it details out, and I think it will look more architecturally correct from the view from the river and certainly for the people who are on the porch. And then I just wanted to go into one other detail, which I think is really important, and it doesn't seem to be consistent between the renderings, so I'm kind of ignoring the renderings on this. And then this section, and that is the section to the left of the one we're just looking at, we have a sloping soffit, which I believe is typical throughout the project. So your underside of your soffit is sloping up to the brick, and it's not a little flat soffit at the eave. It's kind of a typical eave detail here.
Mm-hmm. Talking right here, yeah.
Right.
Let me zoom in a little bit more for you.
Right. That would be, for me, kind of an important preferred detail, because it leads to a clean eave line as it projects out. Looks like this. It doesn't kind of pork chop at the end back to the building. I think you've got a kind of a mix of what happens on the model, and I understand that.
Okay.
Somebody's modeling it early on, and they're trying to figure out how to model it. But I think that detail also allows for a beam expression on the side, and we're cutting through the front of that where the column is. But as you run back from the column back to the building, that gives you a face above the face of column running up to that sloping soffit.
Okay, so this is your preference though, what's shown here, but just be consistent with it. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, carry that through, everywhere except maybe those little porch roofs.
Yeah, and it's a good comment. I can't speak to every detail. Like you pointed out, if it's just something that's a legacy item in the renderings, and this is the intent throughout the building, but we certainly will confirm that.
And then you speak to the soffit, so the underside of the eave, the soffit material, and then the ceiling material on the porches.
Okay.
I mean, do you know what that is?
Yeah. I know, and I have to find it. Mike, do they have the PDF that you created that has, we wanted to bring material samples over, but due to the virtual nature here, so we actually prepared a PDF that had manufacturers and, we did do a material presentation. Now, I don't think we got as detailed as a soffit and a porch ceiling, George, I'll be honest with you. So I may have to come back with that information, but if Mike, was that sent separately or was that in that?
Yeah, that was sent separately to Harry. Let me try to find it real quick and I can email it.
If you email it to me, I'll open up. We did do a material presentation though that speaks to all the major components.
Yeah.
So we can open that up.
And one of your sections, eave sections shows clear cedar soffit board to match cladding.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's wood.
Yeah.
I can tell you we're not using any vinyl products anywhere on the project. That I can confirm.
Right.
Yeah.
And the one that would be a shame would be like an aluminum,
Yeah. No.
Like,
Yeah.
So if you've got clear cedar soffits, I think that would be exactly what I would hope for.
Or what about a composite alternate, but like I'm not talking cedar, but something like we're looking at KW, that the material proposal actually shows a KWP composite cedar lap siding board, not natural cedar, and they have a soffit product that matches that. We're looking for
I just emailed that to you, Vince.
Okay, we're looking for a little lower maintenance for our homeowners than the work that obviously, as we all know, that comes along with keeping up on clear cedar and what that can look like if it's not well done. I'm sorry, I'll open it in just 1 second when it comes through.
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping for at least a solid sheet material or.
Yeah, it won't be vinyl or aluminum, I can assure you that, and we can,
And, and hopefully something maybe nicer than that on the actual.
yeah, on the porch ceiling. Yeah, okay.
Are you proposing, it says clear cedar on the siding as well, so what you're
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
is, okay, there you go.
Yeah, here's the actual product that we're proposing. This is not a, this is an individual board that goes up, but it is an engineered product. So, it's got it's got a 20-year warranty on the color. Like I said, especially one thing that we're aware of with these buildings is with the proximity to the river, maintenance, getting up and restaining natural cedar from the river would be very difficult. And in order to make sure that all 6 residences look consistent for a long time, we're trying to focus on engineered products that will look consistent for a very long time, and not be an ongoing maintenance item every 2 or 3 years. As we all know, clear cedar, it looks beautiful, but it takes a lot of work to keep it looking that way.
I was actually worrying about it.
Yeah.
Nice material, but then you
Yeah.
get like patchy, dark, kind of dirty looking areas, or sometimes black areas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where the sun hits it.
Yeah.
That is really a tough maintenance issue.
It is. So this is, we've got a lot of samples, and this is the product. It's a premium cladding product. I'm not sure if anyone's worked with it. It's a nice product. It's got a great warranty. It looks very close. There's these, so we sent this over. I'm not sure if this has been forwarded out to you guys. We can make sure it gets sent out. So there's links to information about the manufacturer and everything here. So we have our lap siding here. I don't want to get off track here, but since I have this open, I thought I'd at least scroll through real quickly so you know what we have, and we can refer back to it if needed. We've got information about that there's 2 tones of brick. So we have that. This is the darker one, and this is the lighter one. There was a comment early on that there was a very white looking brick this is not that. This is a gray. It's called platinum. We've got the file here. Sometimes the colors don't render out perfectly on the screen, but this is a gray brick. So we have those are 2 tones of brick.
Were you going to do that contrasting mortar, or is your mortar going to be more monolithic?
That's a good question, George. I'd have to kind of check with architects on that a little bit. I think the intent would be for it to look a little more monolithic versus this might be the only stock image we had, but if we look at our renderings, it would be, the renderings reflect a more monolithic look on the brick. So yeah, so I think that's just, we try to, as far as what we could find off their website, this is how it was shown. They ask you to focus on the brick. Dimensional asphalt roof, where we have roof, we've got a standing seam metal on those few areas. And then this is actually one of our past projects, but this is a Pella window with the grids and everything. And so this is what we have to refer back to if we start talking about materials at all. We do have physical samples for all these things that just due to the nature of these meetings, there wasn't a way to present that. So we put this together as an alternate. So.
What is the glass tint? We've had some issues lately in other projects with houses appearing to have dark glass.
Yep, I certainly understand that. Yeah, we're not adding any tint to the glass. They will have the low E coating from the manufacturer on it to help with UV transmittance into the house, but there is no additional tint beyond just the standard low E coating.
Is it a 272 or is it a 366?
George, I don't know that off the top of my head. I can circle back to you. Mike, if you want to, while we're talking, you might even be able to open we have a proposal from Pella on that. If it's called out there, I might be able to get you that information shortly here.
That's a follow-up item. 366 looks darker. 272 looks very familiar and is basically a typical low E.
Yeah, I know Pella has 2 versions. They have something called like their Sun Defense, which is a more aggressive low E coating, and then their standard. So we have not requested that Sun Defense. It's the standard. So we'll try to pull it up while we're talking here.
Okay.
Is there any other screens or drawings I can switch to besides the siding right now for anybody?
This sample I'm looking at, is that one sample, because there's actually several different textures that I'm looking at. Is it just a mixture of textures, or
That's one sample to try to represent the variety that you would see within this product.
So you can pick, there are 4 samples in front of me then.
Nope, that's one. That's one product. You're just seeing some different grain variation across it. So when we install this on the buildings, you'll see a variety of grain texture just like this. Really, you'd have to be very close to pick that up. But if you were standing right up on it, you'd see some variety in the grain, just like you would with a natural wood product.
Would you say this is comparable to like a Nichiha type product?
Personally, I think I've been a little scared. We've used Nichiha a lot. Yes, it's comparable in price to a Nichiha product, but it's not large panels like Nichiha. Whereas Nichiha, this would be, these 4 pieces might be one panel, and then you have to deal with the joints. These are still individual clapboards. These are still individual clapboards that are blind nailed, no face nailed. So you get all the definition that comes with that, and you don't have the control joints or the panel joints you have to detail. This goes up and installs just like cedar wood.
So it's okay. So individual clapboards.
They're individual clapboards that still go up. This is not like a panelized product like Nichi.
More like a Miratech.
Yep. Yeah. Like a Miratech. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Or an LP. I mean, not that this is, but or like, LP has a similar product like that would be clapboards like this as well. So.
Does the board want to go back to the elevations?
Yes. Just so I'm clear, are we approving the first 2 units today or just the N4?
The N4, Wendy.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Run that by me again. I thought we discussed approving the whole project, period.
Yeah, and that's where that was the reference I was making earlier to the piecemeal approval of the presentation. But at a previous meeting, I think we agreed to preliminary approval of the end 4 units and that the beginning 2 units could be presented at a later date for preliminary. I'm not sure where we were going on that on final.
It was a holdback attached to that, as I recall.
Yeah. Our intent is only is to present residences the back 4, 3 through 6. We're fully aware that we'll be bringing residents 1 and 2 back through as a complete submittal, both for preliminary and final as a completely separate submittal. So we're not asking for any approvals related to the first 2 units today. We're just looking to discuss 3 through 6, and that's all that's part of this application.
3 through 6.
Yeah. Now, of course, we have the one rendering that shows everything, and I still think, that it was important to try to present the site, but this submittal is only for 3 through 6.
It's important to me that you've come back through with units 1 and 2 that do now conform to the height restrictions. So we can see them, that the massing of them is, I considered it more successful, and I think the comments were primarily about the windows, and I think we can talk about the same window issues here in the buildings 3 through 6, but I would have been concerned about approving 3 through 6 if 1 and 2 hadn't gotten in terms of massing where they needed to be.
I do think the massing was successful when you came back the other day on 1 and 2. I agree with George. And I think we were very clear about the window discussion for 1 and 2, which really isn't on the table today.
Right.
Yep, and we have those notes. I wasn't part of that call. I know Mike was, but we have the notes and we know what we need to work on there, and we'll be putting together a formal preliminary submittal based on those notes for 1 and 2. We're up, we have the 20-day submittal window and all that, and we know what meeting we're targeting for that. We're certainly going to listen to everything that was said for those and address, and do our best to address those items, certainly. Today, obviously we'd like to focus on the back 4, just to keep our process moving forward and know what we need to do.
So I see one significant change has been the lower level basement windows below the decks, where they have become smaller. And I think I'm just looking for a little more consistency in the width of the separation of those windows. I've seen one triple looked like it was mulled together as a group. And then there was one with a mull that was not too wide. And then I think like these, which I'm looking at the bottom of the bottom group of elevations, middle three buildings, right? The windows underneath the deck, I guess I'd like grids in the two side ones, but then they're quite separated. Or to me, that's not really it's not where the cursor is, it's to the left.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't move it, but I know what we're talking
Right,
about here.
right,
Yeah,
right
yeah.
there.
So do you like the punched openings better that way than the one next to it on the left, George?
I think so, and I'm interested in the comments of the board. I mean, I think those side openings should have grids, at least, possibly all three. And I'm curious what the rest of the board thinks about that. But I think if you let the middle window vary, I know you have varying widths of these that you're dealing with. You let the middle window vary and keep a consistent width between the windows. Obviously, the side windows are going to pick up the same proportion as many of the punched windows.
I'm gonna, while we're talking, flip over to the CDs just to see what those renderings show, but I certainly understand the comment. Let's see here.
Yeah, those are the
That's
two that I thought
that's 6. Yep, that's residence 6.
were
And
different.
then yep. So we're talking down here. So I just want to make sure they were consistent between the color. But yeah, so.
Well, and those ones, so that one, I would have an issue with those not being brick. I think that's wide enough to be brick. So I think you either have brick coming between the windows which is more like what you had in the rendering. Yeah,
Yep.
right.
Okay.
So brick between the windows, I would consider acceptable. Or if you go to the intermediate, so you've got a 6-inch, 7-inch wide mull between, and it's detailed with the window trim, that could be okay too, but I think they should be the same everywhere, building 6, building 4, 5, 3, 4.
Certainly. So just so we understand, I just want to be clear on the comments. So the arrangement of these windows is okay. We're talking about material between them and grids in all, or just the flanking windows, or?
Right, and
okay.
And the width of the well, in this case, it's wall between them.
Mm-hmm.
Be consistent. If you go down to 5 or 6 inches and it's just a mullion, then it's and so I know that Bill and others may weigh in on this, so I'm just
Sure. What would you say is a good break point if we're, between being able to put, like, would you say having 12 inches, if you have a foot, it makes sense to put brick in. Under that, it's probably better to put some kind of trim material between them. I mean, you start getting, right? I mean, yeah.
Still 8 or 9 inches.
Brick and a half.
Widest.
Okay. All right.
For wood.
Right.
I think the takeaway here is organizational of composition of the subentity of the overall composition. What that means is if you look to the right, you have organization with the mullions and the windows, although that's matchy-match. To the left, if you just organize, and you just try it with a sketch, just have him show how the organization of the mullions, like starting with the transom, if that's A, the other two ends are B, do that in the middle section and continue on down. And feel better and look better overall.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So I think we're pretty clear on the request on here. Are we moving up now with that into these windows with that? Is there something you'd like to see here as well, or are you happy with this?
From my perspective, on the middle section, if you have a transom that has the muttons in it and you have the two smaller transoms on each side, those mullions from an organizational standpoint should line up down below. They look like they miss, and that from a visual standpoint, it doesn't really feel right. If you line those up, it'll feel a lot better. I don't know if you can do that from a function standpoint, but it's just to the right. If you see there's organizational composition, it'd be the same concept there too.
Okay. Yeah, I understand now. We can absolutely look at it. We're not in any way opposed to it if within the window manufacturer, like if that's actually possible within the manufacturer. We certainly understand the comment, and if Pella can make it work. Well, we're currently looking at Pella and Marvin, but they're both comparable products in the lines that we're looking at. But if they can make it work, then yeah, we can certainly look at it. That's a pair of sliders there, so we just have to see if they can make that happen.
A pair of sliders where?
These are sliding. This middle section are sliding doors here.
Oh, okay.
Same thing up here. Yeah.
Okay. By pair, you mean over the top of each other?
A pair, I mean by two active sliders. So this is a sliding panel and this is a sliding panel, like that meet in the middle. So we can have a larger clear area for the homeowners to be able to open up to the deck.
Sure.
They slide out over the fixed windows to the left and right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it looks like they could get bigger.
Yeah.
From Bill's standpoint, what Bill's comments, can you make the transom lights align? Is that what you're saying, Bill?
Or make the doors align.
Make the doors align.
Yeah, and we're certainly we have no objection whatsoever to that if it works with the as long as we can, if the window manufacturer says it's doable. We get it. I think it's a good comment. It's just a question of functionality within the limits of the manufacturer.
You point out in a rendering the building that will receive the gray brick that we looked at earlier.
Yeah, so just on even the screen we're looking at, this would be the dark brick, the charcoal, and this would in this here it's flanked on either side by the gray.
I guess I'm looking for the rendering.
Got it.
The other side.
Mm-hmm. Let me see if I can. Yeah. You know, in the renderings, the coloring all looks similar because they are just a light gray and a dark gray. So I'm trying to find the best way to present that. So let me back off here just for a second, get my bearings here. Sorry, I've got a lot of stuff open here.
Well, I appreciate your help.
Yeah. Okay. So I can. All right. So looking, and I'll go back to the rendering. I know you want to see the rendering. So just so I remember, so we've got dark, light, dark, light. So if we go back to here, dark. Okay. So this would be the dark brick, light, and then dark as we work our way back. Does that help?
Yes. The other side, the riverside.
Sure. Yes, sir. So again, these two would be light here, dark gray down here.
And then units 1 with 2 would be one light gray color, or would you vary those on 1 and 2?
You know, I don't. I mean, it's shown here. I don't want to. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing on 1 and 2 since they're still in the early stages.
Okay.
I like the muted look. Yeah.
Yeah, we know that originally we had showed you quite a bit of contrast in the brick. We had showed you some dark and some really light, and that certainly wasn't well received. We understood it, and so we still have 2 bricks, but they're not too far apart in color to kind of, so it's not as stark of a difference as you transition between the different units.
The what is it? Mortar is 20% of the surface of a wall, so the monolithic look will be important, and it'd be nice not to have it any lighter.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's still a pretty strong contrast between those colors. you could probably even two-tone it, bring the dark one back a little bit towards the light one click. But I think having two different colors of gray in the brick is a successful strategy.
We thought it helped to just, we understand we want it. We certainly want the whole site to look cohesive as it's one project and uniform, but still offer a little bit of contrast or individuality between the units just to help define so it doesn't start to run together as one building. And that was the strategy with the two tones of the brick, but then have some constants like the cedar look siding and the trim colors that are constant throughout all of them.
Steve, do you have any other window comments now that those lower windows have kind of been separated and made it more individual? What's your thought? So for instance, in this picture,
Oh, sorry, George. I'll get back to it. There we go.
so for instance, in this picture, you wouldn't, to the very right there underneath that balcony, you wouldn't have all that glass together down below the balcony. It's pulling down and it's pulling in a little bit and separating. I think that's the significant change I saw. What's your thought, Steve? I know, and Wendy, I know you
Well,
got.
isn't that unit one? Aren't those units 1 and 2?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
1 and 2 over
Really.
here.
Probably hasn't been changed. I mean, I'm just
Mhm.
trying to say that's kind of was the change that was
Oh,
made.
right.
And I think that's what we're probably waiting for your feedback on that.
1 and 2 are the main concerns with glass because the elevation is higher and more exposed and more in line with the road. You come down that road, you drive at the buildings and then by the buildings. And it's a very dark surround with the woods and so forth from this side for sure. A lot of glass. I mean, I've been preaching that since day number 1. And in some cases, I'm not sure why it's necessary. You want to sell these, you want the view, that's what's going to sell these. I understand that. One, there's no view from the staircase that's necessary. So that's for another day. In terms of, I wish I could see the contrast of the new gray brick versus this gray brick, because you don't want them to look like a row house. They're all the same. Well, they're different in many ways, so I don't think it's going to look like a row house all the same. So variations are fine. Why it needs to be lighter, I'm not sure, and I'm having trouble, quite frankly, understanding what light brick is going to look like in those 2 units.
This rendering may represent more the lighter color than the darker, or it might be even in the middle. I'm not sure about that.
Is there a way to know that? The lighter one that we saw way before is definitely lighter than this, and I appreciate your changing that.
Yeah, I feel like the best representation we have of just the variation would be here, just at least to help with the organization of it.
Okay, you're saying that color is most like what?
Well, I'm just saying like this image that I have open would be probably the best representation to help show some variation between them. The renderings aren't doing a great job of showing the color variation between the 2 bricks, but this color 2D elevation does. I guess was my comment.
I know in the past
could we
project,
see your lighter? Could we see your current gray color sample slide that you had a while back, please?
Here we go.
You zoom out a little bit so you can get them both on one screen.
See, I think there's still a fairly strong contrast there, and it might be a bit too stark.
Mhm.
Yeah, can we dummy down the light one?
Yeah.
We actually, Mike and I personally spent quite a bit of time at Thomas Brick going through every brick sample they have, and the grays are tough. There's just, you know, you don't want it to look beige. You want it to be a gray. Charcoal's charcoal. This is pretty straightforward, the black of the charcoal. But we really did not find, there wasn't a lot of room, I guess, George, what I'm saying, between this one and the charcoal. And it's not for lack of trying. We walked every row, you know, with Brian Williams over there of all of their samples from every manufacturer. And they either just looked so close, there was almost no point in doing it because
And
you
in
wouldn't, it'd be
past
such a subtle.
projects-
Yeah.
In past projects, we've done some that are real close, and when you step back, you can't even see the
Yeah,
difference.
honestly, like the architects know that there's a difference. You know, we've had jobs where we've done just the same color in a wire cut versus a smooth, thinking that subtle of a detail would add in some contrast, and it just bled together. We did, you know, I mean, I don't want to tell you, yeah, we'll go back and look at it and not have it, because we actually did put a lot of effort into the grays here.
Which joint are you going to use, the top one or the bottom one?
Joint wise, it would be the top one, not raked back.
Yeah. That's part of what makes these look not quite the same, you know, not quite as compatible. Just you got the raked joints with a matching mortar, and then you've got the you know, tool joint but flush with such a contrasting mortar. That's
yeah, and sorry, these are just the stock. You know, the boards wouldn't show it that way. These are just the best images we could find online.
Yeah.
We might have some more current renderings for you to look at if you want to give me a second that show the brick a little better. If you'd like to see that, I can probably find it in a second here.
It's hard in the renderings, though, to actually portray what George is talking about, the level of contrast. This is a really high level of contrast. And I might throw out the suggestion of not doing the contrast, of just sticking with one color throughout. Because that platinum is going to pop, especially right next to that very dark, they're calling it almost a vintage black brick, that dark charcoal gray brick. That is going to make it pop even more.
That rendering we're looking at right now might be more closer to the platinum.
This is new. I just opened this. So this is a view we've seen a minute ago, but that helps to see. So once again, we're not really looking over here, but you know, we do have a lighted dark, and then we have, this is the platinum and this is the dark down here.
Yeah.
So
that is the brick you're proposing.
Yeah, this is the most current. Yeah.
Looks like it has a matching mortar.
Yeah.
You're gonna do brick samples on site, like little mini walls?
I guess honestly I haven't gotten that far. Typically, you know, we'll you know, these selections are done pretty far in advance off of our sample boards, and we commit to them at that point. And you know, on a larger project, it's kind of hard to react to it that fast on site, and depending on lead times on material, you know, it's a lot of brick. So I wouldn't want to tell you we could do that and not, you know, just depending on lead times of the material and stuff. We're pretty committed once we select it normally.
You know, I would comment that we've done renderers all over the country, and renderings never look like what it actually looks like, color wise and everything. I've tried a million different people, and what George suggested of doing what we try to do is site mock-ups and actually put the brick in each other and put some siding up there to really see what it really is going to look like. Because I mean, I've never found a rendering. I mean, you can get close, but it really never looks like what it's going to be.
Yeah, two different bricks, two different mortars.
I've done mock-up walls on projects more for technical flashing details to make sure all the trades on site understand how every penetration of windows flash. That's more from a building envelope perspective. It's certainly a great strategy aesthetically, and I understand it. I guess I would question, you know, by the time we'd be doing that, we'd be permitted and approved through you guys. There's no opportunity for us to be that far along in the project where we're still selecting color. I mean, you know, that would be implying that we wouldn't be committed to a brick color until after we've started construction, which is kind of the antithesis of what we're doing right now to get it approved in advance so you know what it's going to look like. So I don't know how that would really procedurally work.
I guess I'm not.
If that makes
following.
sense, right? I don't know. Yeah.
You want to be approved before we see it.
Well,
What you just said,
Well,
I think.
it's a chicken or the egg thing here, I guess. I mean, you were not allowed to start building until you approve it. So how could,
Well, mock-up, I'm talking, I guess a mock-up to me is four courses of brick that are 4 feet wide. That's a mock-up to me, sitting on a 2x12. Look at. Isn't that what you meant by a mock-up?
but also, you know, I certainly could imagine if we're comfortable with where brick is and the extent of brick, and we're a little uncomfortable with the color, you know, giving approval and saying, you guys get a mock-up together, Thomas Brick gets you, right, 20, 30 bricks of each, and you put something up real quick, that's just, you know, something that we say we would like to follow up with, and you could do it right away. So it's, you know, and obviously you'd have
Got it.
approvals to go ahead and be.
I can go with that, yeah.
so I understand, and thank you as a strategy, I understand that. I guess that's a pretty detailed mock-up, I guess, or I guess costly mock-up. Is that something that people have done in the past for you guys, where they've actually built mock-up walls as part of the, I mean, I understand
Absolutely.
providing physical samples.
Absolutely.
routinely
I had to
done
do it
on
for my
historic
office building.
Pardon, Wendy?
I'm just going to say it's routinely done in historic projects. Yeah. The mason should be familiar with coming in and building a short knee wall, showing the materials, showing the mortar color, showing the raking, all of that.
Right, and I understand that especially on the importance of that on a historic project where you might be trying to match an existing historic material. But I've been doing this a long time, and besides physical samples on a new project like this, not in a historic area, it seems like a pretty big ask.
Well, we're not talking about a big mock-up. We're talking about 2 foot by 2 foot or something, just enough to see the mortar and see the brick. And we don't know the mortar yet. And it's really hard to tell from a photograph or a rendering, which, as Bill says, never looks quite the same as the actual thing.
Certainly.
And I think this board is reacting to getting burned on West Orange condos with the exterior materials, which really ended up being quite different from anything we envisioned.
I would be certain, you know, and we offer to bring in physical samples, because I completely agree that color renderings are never perfectly representative of the final product. I, without question, will agree with that comment. So we would be happy to bring in sample boards with the mortar samples showing the matching mortar for that monolithic look that's been requested. And we offered to do that prior to this meeting, and it was just, we were asked to do the electronic submittal. We have those boards. It's not like we didn't have them ready. We fully expected you folks to want to see physical samples of the primary cladding materials, and we had that ready to go. So we can drop those off. I honestly, that the mock-up, we'll bring the sample boards over with the mortar samples.
And they're matched. I mean, you have samples of the brick next to the mortar that you're going to use.
We'll bring, so yeah, from the manufacturer of the mortar, they have color, just like you would like a grout, just like you have like a grout deck and you're picking grout.
To me, but you don't have the right mortar with the right brick.
Well, they would just have bricks, Steve. They would have bricks and they would have the mortar there.
Yeah,
that's not the same. That's why we go to the trouble.
I think that'd be very helpful.
And if you could bring the wood sample as well.
Yeah, I think that'd be very helpful.
We had all that ready to go for this meeting. Harry said they're just, and I understand why, with the virtual arrangement of this, we could have had that at the meeting. You guys could have gone and looked at it prior to this. We offered that up. We have the samples ready to go. The digital presentation that you're seeing was in lieu of that, because we were told that there wasn't a mechanism to bring in the physical samples.
Yeah, I don't think this is saying that. I don't think this is saying that you didn't do what you were supposed to do. I think it's just us seeking a little, enough information to feel comfortable with those actual.
Oh, no, I understand that. I just, I think this, if say the next meeting is also virtual, it would have been certainly more productive if we could have been able to get those physical samples to you in hand before. We'd be talking about that now. So the next meeting is going to be virtual also, most likely, I'm guessing. And I don't see how that's different than now. We weren't able to bring them in for this. So that's all. That was my point.
I would point out that the fastest way to get this project moving is to throw up some samples, perhaps out at the site, and we can visit them at our own time. We could have seen all this stuff 6 months ago, but we didn't. And now we're in a big rush. I understand when you want to go ahead, but the brick and the mortar is very important to this whole project. And I would just, what can I say? Do it right and put up a mock-up and let's go.
I don't see as a mock-up being a detriment to moving forward with this project. We're happy to bring in the physical.
Okay.
No,
there we go.
I'm saying we're happy to bring in the physical samples, but I've never been asked to do a physical mock-up on site for colors in 20 years of doing this. I'm working on a $30 million project in Rocky River right now that has various amounts of cast stone, townhomes and condominiums. And it was a very thorough process that took 7 months to get through. And there was nothing requested beyond the sample boards from the manufacturers. And we'd be happy to bring those in with the mortar samples for you guys to look at. But a mock-up on site, it seems, it's just not something that we're gonna do. For 4 single family houses and 2 colors of brick.
Mm-hmm. I built my building at 34 South Main in 1984, and I had to do a mock-up back then.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's near to older, it's not on Church Street, but they wanted to maintain the flavor of the neighborhood. They wanted to see what it was about. And
this is not in a historic district, and none of the historic district requirements.
There are 2 historically significant houses. One's next door to you or behind you up the hill, and the other is down on Low Street. I think it's called Low Street. So you're not on Church Street, but you have to get along with the fabric of this town. It's in the code. You should read it. The feeling of the neighborhood has to be maintained.
Maybe
the neighborhood of the future across the river has to be maintained.
Why don't we say let's review those materials prior to the next meeting. And if more information is needed at that point, I mean, I'm kind of comforted. It's not raked joints. It's typical tool joints. And if we see the bricks and the mortar physically next to each other, then you could make a determination at the next meeting if you feel that you need more information. You know, I mean, we could start there. Why don't we start there? Because that's something that is readily available to these guys. They have it ready. We can take a look at it. I mean, if we can just move forward, I don't think butting heads is really helpful on this.
Well, if it answers the question, fine. If it's not, it's another lost 2 weeks.
I will say that we've had mock-ups done before. Riverwalk had a mock-up on site. We've done it with some of the single family homes up in Falls Walk. So it's not uncommon.
I just had two comments, just concluding. One, whatever we decide here, it's going to be here forever. And everyone says, oh, forever is a long time, but it's going to be here our lifetime, the next lifetime. No one's going to come and tear this stuff down in the next 10, 20, 40, 50 years. So I think that to do a couple extra things for you guys to have a great project and be great. We're not trying to be jerks about it. We just want to get the best possible project we can possibly get at this time period in history, because it's going to go for a long time. There's the one comment I'd like to make. The other comment I'd like to circle back on landscape architects. And I'm not saying this to be that you didn't hire a landscape architect. I'm saying that when you get a civil engineer involved, the civil engineer is going to solve the problem from utilitarian and just from a utilitarian standpoint and just solve the problem. A landscape architect really is the lead, and they guide the civil engineer on how to make things look aesthetically correct and get a great project. And again, this is all because what we're trying to do here is create a feeling. And so if you get an awesome feeling, these babies will sell like hotcakes. And so we're trying to do it not only for the community, but also for you and to sell these things as quickly as possible to make capital. That's all I was going to say.
Yes, and we appreciate that. We you know, in the same light, we want to turn out a project that obviously that we're going to be able to sell. Quite frankly, we've got reservations already on several of these. People are very happy with what they're seeing in the renderings. The most expensive residence on site has a reservation on it. I understand that at times some of, you know, there's especially in a historical area, there's requirements for something like a mock-up. I don't want to spend too much more time, you know, debating that, but I certainly also recognize that it's not a universal requirement across every project that's done in the village. We want you to be satisfied with the brick colors. We've updated our renderings multiple times to reflect that and reflect your input on that. We're offering to bring in the physical samples for that along with the mortar. We get that you're not satisfied with the level of detail that you have now on the brick, and we understand that you need to see more, and we're hearing you loud and clear on that. We're going to bring those in along with the rest of the physical samples. Absolutely, we understand that. What I'm trying to work through here is, you know, we spent quite a bit of time going through the comments from the preliminary approval and watching the videos and listening to everything that you said and making sure we responded to every single item, and we're happy to do that. That's the process. And we feel like we've done that. We've changed the brick colors, the columns, the brackets, everything that's been asked of us from the last round of minutes we've done. And we're happy to take the comments from here, these couple of items, if they can be, if they're small enough where it's possible to get an approval contingent on final color approval on the brick, we would certainly ask for that. The brick and the retaining wall, so these seem to be the two big items that we've talked about today. We understand that you need to see more on that. We want to listen to every comment that you make and respond to it and make sure that you're satisfied with it. What we don't want to end up going in another position is a couple weeks from now having a new round of comments that we weren't asked or told about, and then we have to come back. You know, we need some kind of defined goals here so we know what you need to see to be satisfied. From everything I'm hearing today, we've spent most of our time talking about the retaining wall and the brick colors. So if those are the outstanding items for residents 3 through 6, I would request that we look for approval on everything else contingent on those 2 items, and understanding that you need to be satisfied in some form on those items. Much more detail on the retaining wall and an opportunity to review and approve the colors of the brick. That would be my request. And if there's a couple other comments that we can show you, we'd be happy to do that. Please don't misinterpret this as I understand that you need to see more on the brick and the retaining wall. We hear you.
No, you don't hear us, because we want a mock-up, and you're mealy-mouthing your way around the mock-up. And when you look at a brick and you look at the mortar that's between the brick on the sample, and then you look at the mortar over here, it's not the same. That's why the people go to the trouble to do a mock-up. You're in a big hurry. You're in a big hurry to do it your way, is what I'm hearing.
I don't know how to respond to that. I'm sorry, Mr. King. We're offering to bring in all the physical samples that you need. A mock-up is not something that's required of every project that's in front of you. I understand that some people do it. For what we're looking at here, excuse me?
When asked, they do it, yeah.
And not everybody is asked, I guess, is my point. And the brick makes up roughly 50% of each one of these houses. It's 4 houses. It's a pretty simple brick and a brick joint detail. And I feel like the colors in the mortar are quite easily interpreted from the samples that we bring in. We're not trying to match anything existing. And that's the only reason that I'm, I guess, lack of a better term, pushing back on that a little bit, because I feel like all the information you need to understand what it's going to look like is within the samples in the mortar.
What I would propose is, if you do decide, if we go the route of having you bring in the samples, It may take longer if we get there and decide we need a mock-up on site. So in order to expedite and keep things moving along, a mock-up would keep things moving along a lot faster.
But it may take them a couple weeks to get the bricks for a mock-up together.
The brick on this site is
So it
extremely
wouldn't lose them
important.
any time if they don't, if it's gonna take a couple weeks or 3 weeks or a month to get a mock-up anyway.
I would have an easier time if this was one color. I could look at one of those colors and see, and it blends. I have a lot of concern about the high contrast between those two colors, that we're going to get a checkerboard effect on top of what's already going on here. So I have a lot of concerns about seeing it on site. I am willing to entertain the applicant wanting to come in and just present samples, but I want to be very clear that if we get there and we're not satisfied with what we're seeing, that we're going to follow up and request, we reserve the right to request a mock-up, which is going to hold things up.
And
Could I offer a suggestion that may or may not have been discussed? First of all, let me ask the question, is the intended mortar color going to be the same in both samples, or are you intending to use 2 different mortar colors and 2 different bricks?
The intent would be to use 2 different mortar colors and 2 different bricks. So the most closely matching mortar to the lighter color brick and the most closely matching mortar to the darker colored brick. It's not meant to be a design element. It's meant to, go along with that monolithic look of the brick and not be a contrasting thing.
It's a relatively simple process to pick a mortar color and to pick and take a mortar, a brick panel board and just do the just bag grout that sample with.
And that's a reasonable request, and we'd be happy to do that. You'd have no objection. There would be no objection from us in taking one of the sample boards and actually installing the matching mortar into it so you have a better representation of it. We'd be happy to do that for you.
that's a great idea, Phil.
Okay.
Yeah, that's certainly reasonable, and we can do that. You're going to see how good I am at striking off brick joints because I'm going to do this myself. So
There you go. The other comment I had or question I had was circling back to when George was talking about the detail for the, I don't know what you're calling them, the rear
Beams.
verandas or porches, and how the trusses are how the trusses fall with respect to the top of the column, that there's no definition of a beam of any kind. And I've been searching back and forth on these drawings. I have a section a section 2 on A3-32 that shows about a 6 or 8 inch step up from the top of the columns to the underside of the truss. And then on another drawing, 2A3-13, it shows it flush, or maybe it's reversed from that, but there's
Correct.
2 separate details, and there is no detail that I can find that shows a section through that sloped soffit and how that sloped soffit, like a detail around the corner from these, at the edge of the roof line where the gutters would run.
You mean through that porch? An eave detail at the porch?
Yeah, there's 2 different details for 2 different structures showing it through, we'll call it the outside face where the railing is.
The gable end with the rake detail, but not the E detail.
Exactly. The gutter edge is not detailed. How that, I mean, you've got to have a beam in there, and I don't know how, because that's supporting those columns are supporting the roof. Are you following me, Vince?
I am. I'm sorry. I'm emailing behind the scenes with Emmett's team. They're on the call, listening. Just trying to confirm that because I don't want to speak out of turn on it. They are agreeing that there should be a slight beam at the ceiling. Yeah, and they certainly agree with your comment. I'm not sorry. I'm doing like 10 things at once here, trying to get this information for you. Yeah, so there should be a slight beam like you're mentioning there.
It's, yeah, if you look at section in the resident 6, that section showing a beam is what's throwing me is I don't understand why in the one case the trusses seem, the bottom of the corner of the truss seems to be higher than.
Right.
So yeah, we're in agreement. We're in agreement that there needs to be a beam there, and there's some resolution for that area that needs to be done. And we'd be happy to show you a better section of what you need to see to understand that. Certainly.
And I think the one that wasn't caught up was the one on 332.
Yes.
I think the post on A313 looked good, and so it's important that the beam kind of, as you said, Vince, the beam, we're raising the ceiling, not dropping a beam below where the top of the
Yeah, we don't want to close in that space between the top of the parapet wall, if you want to call it that, or railing, and the underside of the beam.
You need the 5 feet, right?
Right. Certainly, and we happy to provide some more details on that, specifically the whole section through the porch roof.
That's
Bill, if I can say on the plan review, it was picked up on the plan review that they need to supply us with engineered shop drawings of the roof trusses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, this is, Harry, I agree with you, but this is more than the roof truss, because there's some sort of beam that I don't see. I don't know how it's detailed. And then when you look at that resident 6 section, that the beam that is shown there is shown too wide. It's actually matching up with the outer edge of that column shaft instead of the or the column capital instead of the shaft, I guess is.
And I just right, and I think that's all true. Just to put it in perspective, I think that's an easy follow-up item.
Yes,
and that's a condition on approval, not a revise and resubmit type.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, and we're certainly it's a good catch. We're clear that what we need to show there. So
Great. Anyone want to make a motion or?
How many conditions are we looking at here? The bricks, we beat to death.
Brick, retaining wall, brick,
Retaining wall.
brick, beam at the porches to be shown both at the the eave condition and the rake condition.
The organizational composition of the window grids, mullions, and transom.
Well, I would just say consistency at the, right.
Using, that was Bill's comment, yeah.
Yep.
I
Consistent.
have a,
Go ahead, Wendy.
Steve, I have a motion I've put together. I don't know if you've been keeping notes as well.
Go ahead.
I make a motion for final approval of units 3 through 6 with the following contingent conditions. Number 1, of submittal of retaining wall details. Number 2, overall attention to organizational composition of window grids, mullions, and transoms. Number 3, presentation of sample board mock-up of brick color and mortar color and treatment. And number 4, details of gutter edge, soffit, and beam with a section to be submitted.
Do you want to see anything with the landscaping?
I defer to the rest of the board. Well, that's the to me. Okay, the retaining wall and landscape details.
Well,
Can you defer that to a building 1 and 2 comment? Because the only place they have the landscape is in front of 1 and 2, and we have to still see 1 and 2 for final.
Well, the retaining wall, yeah, I guess I'm most interested in the retaining wall details from, are you going to stone cap it? How are you going to treat the wall? And I
Right.
guess that is in the area of 1 and 2, but are we making landscape a whole another element? It's not confined to 1 and 2.
There's just no room to
Retaining
put in.
wall
You
is
can't
a
even
whole
put a,
element that extends along the length of that drive. So
but the wall's a specific element. You can't even fit a bush on the rest of the site, except for in front of building 1 and 2 between it and Cleveland Street, where I think understanding what that's going to look
see at
like.
the next, I would like to see as part of this, the retaining wall with those, if you want to call them landscaping details. I don't want to now cut this wall in half and say, okay, I only need to see the back half of the wall and not the front half of the wall. I don't want to go down that road.
Oh, yeah.
So
Some landscaping for the wall was mentioned, I believe.
Yeah.
We're absolutely happy to present everything you need to see on the retaining wall, and we understand that you need to see more.
yeah,
On the landscape item, and I understand the wall would, I guess, be in the landscape realm because it's a hardscape item. But as far as the plantings themselves go, and I just want to clarify just a procedural question, my understanding is that a landscape plan is not required.
I'm looking at hardscape.
Got it. Okay, understood. And we'll make sure that you have.
Yeah, the rest of the board members for comment, but what I'm thinking is the hardscape elements.
Yep, and we hear that, and we'll make sure that we provide thorough details on the additional details on the retaining wall, so you have all the information you need to understand what's happening with it.
And then Bill and Steve, did you have any other notes that I might have missed that you want to add to that motion?
No,
I do not.
Okay, so that's the motion, Harry.
Okay, Joan, do you have all those comments? And do you guys want to see this again, or you're done with it?
On the details, yes. On the condition items, I do.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Joan, do you copy all the comments?
Yes, because Wendy's going to send it to me too.
I was about to offer that. I will send you via email, Joan. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Motion by Naylor. Who made the second?
I will second it. I will make
Child?
this further comment. It seems to fit in here as good as any place else, that this, I don't know, forming of an adversarial feeling needs to go, because we have common ground to work with. We have, you want to build a nice place and make money. We want you to build a nice place and make money. How this affects the rest of the town is very much of a factor. Vince, you've made several comments today that proves to me that you need to read the code. In other words, well, this isn't in a historical district, therefore we need to read the code, because we approve things that will affect the entire town, and the feeling that the town has, and the values that the town has. So it doesn't have to be on Church Street to get along with the rest of the town. And so I'd look into that, so you're on firmer ground.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, motion by Naylor, seconded by King. Childs,
Yes.
Naylor,
Yes.
King.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Ooh,
you
that
all.
was easy.
We'll just, I don't know, Harry, if we want to, we just want to make sure we understand the procedures for getting all this information back to everyone and the timing of that and how that relates to the process, just so we can make sure we get everything that we've been asked to do over in the, if there's I don't know how, when it's approved with these 4 items, how that, is that within the resubmittal timeframe, or is that, how do we move forward? How do we get this information on what time frame? How is it presented? Just want to make sure we dot the I's on getting everything that everyone needs to see over to them.
It's 11-day resubmittal. I would suggest maybe getting some comments back from our engineer before resubmitting. Make sure everybody's in line with that.
So 11-day resubmittal, but is that then, because don't we normally have to turn this around by like Friday or something for the next, if we wanted to have this on the next meeting?
That's 11 days before the next meeting. That, I think that's what Harry intended to say. Right. So
But
for
the
us to
next meeting
see
is,
for us to see stuff, but I mean, if it takes longer than that to make those panels, I mean, Harry, I mean, it's not really a resubmittal. So can we just, let them make the panels when they can make the panels? And, you're holding up basically permitting's the next thing, right, Harry?
Yeah, they still have to go through grade plan and preliminary plat review with planning and
right.
zoning. So, I mean, I think
okay.
they're a little ways out yet.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they could make, make their changes and resubmit everything to us, and I can pass along to you and go from there if you'd like.
Yeah, Harry, and I know that we still have a lot of other things going on before we're ready to start building. Completely understand that. I just, we certainly want to get through this phase as soon as possible so we can focus on those other items. And we'd like to get you these required items prior to the next meeting so that they can be reviewed, make sure we satisfy these requirements. So my question just is simply, because it's not a formal resubmittal, or maybe it is, I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of turn, is that due by this Friday, or can we get it to you sometime prior to the next meeting, since they're just these 4 items? I just want to be clear on that.
Well, this Friday is the deadline for the July 7th meeting. So you have time if you want to get on for that meeting. I will tell you that is a long agenda already. So you may want to shoot for July 7th, whenever the meeting is in July, the 3rd.
21st.
21st. But you can get that information to us anytime, and I'll pass along to the ABR and we'll take it from there.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
All right, thank you. That concludes the agenda. I don't know, Christy, is there anybody on that wants to speak?
I will, if there are any members of the public who'd like to comment, please use the raise your hand function. I have no hands raised. It appears that the public has no comments.
Okay, thank you. That concludes your agenda.
All righty. That was easy, huh?
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We're all set then, huh?
Thank you.
All right. Let's have it every week. All right. See you. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye.